This is King Noble Black Supremacy. And with this particular video, I want to demystify the cult phenomenon. That's what I want to go in on this video. I want to really decode the cults for you, the social phenomenon that they call a cult, to give you some insight and some understanding as to what is really happening. Now, every time they talk about a cult, they talk about all these people being under mind control by some leader. Now, we'll use Jim Jones for an example. They were supposedly under mind control of Jim Jones. Let's talk about Waco, Texas, the Dravidians, Charles Manson. All of these organizations were supposed to be under the mind control of this particular leader who had this unlimited control over all the people, supposedly. But that couldn't be the case of why these cults are popping up. Because if all of these cults were under mind control of different leaders, Charles Manson, Jim Jones, etc. Some say the New Orleans is a cult, Dr. Malachi Z. York, or Yahweh bin, or the Yahwehs was a cult, Yahweh bin Yahweh. If all of these different groups, the Mormons, are under mind control, why do they have so much in common with the nature and how they came about? Because they shouldn't have so much in common. The one thing they should have in common is that this particular leader or this one figure had all these individuals under mind control. But you mean to tell me that everybody, every leader or every person who can induce mind control, they all want the same exact things? They want to all live off the grid. They're all interested in polygamy. They're all interested in natural eating. They're all interested in being positive and happy. They all are against society. All of them. We talking about Osho. Some of the Hindu groups. The Krishna Consciousness Society was considered a cult. But they all have these similarities. So why would these individuals want to put these groups under mind control to achieve the same exact goals and the same type situations as these other groups? Why? Why do all these cult leaders want the exact same thing? These are different questions you have to ask, because they say, well, this is what a cult is. And then the people telling you that these are cults operate like a cult. That America itself, dealing with Donald Trump and them spreading democracy and their political slogans, change you can believe in. Yes, you can. Make America great again. This is everything that they have said about a cult, is what has the masses of American people believing in democracy, making them patriots, because a lot of them don't even understand the political nature or have no political understanding of democracy or a Republican, or they're not that educated, but they all have this type of blind devotion to this country. But this country is not considered a cult. You know, the Pledge of Allegiance to America is not a cult song. And then you have people that join the United States military that are directly programmed to go overseas and kill people without even knowing what the foreign policy or what the political agenda of the government is. But it's not considered a cult. It's just the United States military. That's just how things are. That's just this country that we live in. And the same things that you can accuse these people that are forming these cults of, you can accuse the United States government as. But let me demystify these cults for you. So why can America use the same type of method to gain your devotion to this country and make you believe in a system that the complexities of which you do not understand? But if some other individual comes along and use some similar strategies on a more micro level, on a more microcosmic level, then we say that's a cult. But yet these individuals spur up in different places, different locations, different times, different nationalities, with some of the same desires. And you say it's a cult and they're all under mind control. But if Jim Jones wanted some of the same things that Charles Manson wanted, and Charles Manson wanted some of the same things that the dude at Waco, Texas wanted, or the same thing that Osho wanted, if Yahweh Ben Yahweh wanted some of the same things that Dr. Malachi York wanted, and Move wanted some of the same things that they wanted at Waco, Texas, the Move organization, and you call all these are cults, then which cult, which leader is under the which cult is that leader of that cult under mind control to set up an organization with some of the same aspirations of the other cult? Follow me with that. Was Move under the mind control of the people at Waco, Texas? Was Osho under the mind control of people at the Krishna Consciousness Temple? Was Charles Manson under the mind control of Jim Jones? What about the Dravidians? So where can the real mind controller that's starting all these cults that says different time, different locations, and different nationalities, can the real mind controller please stand up? That's making all of these organizations that are labeled as occults spawn up and want similar objectives that are the opposite of society? Where's the real ultimate cult leader at? It starts not to make sense that if you are a vegan, you want to eat a raw diet, you want to live off the land, you don't want the government to bother you. It's certain aspirations that once you connect with other people that have those same aspirations, you are automatically considered a cult. But if you connect with those people who have aspirations that are consistent with the agenda of the United States government, then you're considered a good citizen. You're just an American. You're just patriotic to your country. But if you have a problem with this country and its politics and the socialization and the way it's managed and the way you're being bullied and the way you're being forced around in this society, if you have a problem with that and you unify with people that want an alternative reality and a way to do it different, you're definitely a part of a cult. It sounds like America is using cult tactics on you. That if you don't accept its ideas, any other ideas that you accept, you now are part of a cult. You're now a part of the us versus them. If you don't agree with us, you're over there with them, the cult people, the evil people, the bad people, the negative people. So you mean to tell me all of these cults at different times, locations of people of different nationalities wanted some of the similar things? So since they can't explain that to you, then maybe I can explain to you why this cult phenomenon happens. Well, you have people that are different, have different aspirations than society. They have a problem with what's going on in the world. They think that there is a better way. They're open to an alternative way and a better way of doing things than they see within society. And they want to connect with other people with those same aspirations to create a new paradigm, to create a new reality, a new culture, a new socialization, a new way to interface among one another that would lead to a better world or a different world that these people feel that they would be happier in. And they start off themselves because they don't know any cult leaders or know of any cults, but they start off themselves just experimenting with some different things themselves. Well, let's raise our children in a different way. Let's homeschool them. Let's change our diet. Let's eat vegan. Let's try to start growing some of our own foods. Let's stop using all these chemicals and these unnatural products. Let's stop supporting political ideologies and agendas that we don't want. Let's turn off their media and their television and their propagandas and their lies. They start doing this stuff on their own. Then they meet other people with those same aspirations. Because everybody else want to go along to get along. So they're not going to be able to associate with other people within society that support the beast. Once they turn off their television and make all these alternative changes, people are not going to want to associate with them. You're teaching your children at school. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. So now they're forced to seek out people who think like they do. So they have been in some way ostracized from society. Because society suppressed anything different from its dominant ideology, from its dominant culture. It suppresses it effectively to keep everybody on the same page, making everybody like the same thing. And it's working. That's why you have America. But some people escape that. Their suppression tactics. Their repression tactics. And start getting into alternative ways of doing things. But they can't connect with other people who are going along to get along. So then they end up meeting people like them, which are rare. And as they continue to meet people more like them, a bond starts to form. And the people like them increase. They start meeting more, and through networking more and more and more, and then they become a group. And when they become a group and society tries to repress them again and get them back within its dominant culture and its predominant social conditioning, now as a group, they react and they organize. And they find ways to survive against the weapons of repression, oppression, and suppression within society. To the point where if they come under such attack, that now they have to separate from the dominant society and the dominant culture who will not accept their ways, who have strategical methods to suppress them. Social services being one. But of course, many other intelligence organizations, CIA, FBI, Police Department, Department of Homeland Security, just so many agencies that want to stop these other groups from becoming so big and radically shifting the dominant culture to change society in a massive way. So now they band together as a group and become an independent force of defense of themselves. And they have to separate from society in order to survive, to get away from the attack. Then they find themselves on some land. You're calling it off the grid. They have to run their own and get away from government scrutiny and government tyranny and the inability to live in an alternative cultural paradigm. So now they got their own land, and they've got rid of the repression, suppression, and oppression. And definitely the depression. Because the depression was first. And the depression was the most healthiest part of it. Because when you saw how things were going on in the world and where it was going and where your life was going, if you continue to conform to the dominant culture, you ended up depressed. But you started to see that you was only depressed because you was being repressed, suppressed, and oppressed. So now you get to this land with these people that think alike, that have similar aspirations, that had similar conflicts with society, that wanted something different, that became antisocial because society would not socialize with their way of being. Society was not as open-minded as it tries to present itself to be. It didn't want to hear their views and their different ideas and their way of seeing the world and how things could be different and how they're different. The society didn't want to hear that. They wasn't open-minded to that. So not only was they not open-minded, they attacked it and attempted to suppress it and stomp it out. So now these people separated. And in separation, they ended up in isolation. And through separation and isolation, they was able to maintain what they were doing and get it going and be independent and be self-sufficient. And notice that this started because society would not accept it. Society was a cult itself, that if you don't get with the cult of society, you either got to be eliminated, separated, or isolated. So now they're off on their own land and they're doing their own thing, and it's growing on its own now. But you think society's going to leave it alone? They see something that's different, that's radical, that was a problem in society, and now they see it growing outside of society and reaching its antennas on back into society. So now they see it as a threat. So now they send people in to start messing with it. This is your Jim Jones in Guyana. They start sending people in to agitate it. They try to use subversive tactics in order to suppress it. And they send people in to stir it up. And once they start messing up what people have created as their utopia of their cultural ideals, then those people get back depressed again. And they get very desperate because the only hope that they had to build something outside of the oppression, repression, and suppression of society is now being tampered with and being destroyed. And this was a natural evolution. Remember that. I want you to realize that what we're calling a cult is a natural social evolution. The desires that people had to do the things that exist within the cult was natural desires and inclinations that rose up in them. This was not an artificial, mind-controlled, induced desire. These people wanted something different. They couldn't deal with what was going on in society. So they end up becoming what you call a cult, which is really something that is different, that had to separate and isolate itself to survive because its difference was not accepted, respected, or appreciated by the dominant culture of society. So now they're on their own, they're isolated and separated, and they're doing their own thing. And finally, they have a breath of fresh air. They're no longer depressed without suppression, repression, and oppression. And here comes society again, under the auspices of social services, trying to suppress difference, trying to suppress somebody doing something else. People think the government was set up to serve the people. The government was also set up to prevent the people from establishing something else that's other than the government that exists. It has to fight against that difference. That's a part of its existence, is its ability to suppress a certain types of difference that's not reflective of its agenda in the future of where it's going to go. And the stronger the so-called cult becomes, the more they gain the ability to resist against being suppressed by the dominant agenda of society, to have everyone assimilated into a particular cultural paradigm, to have everybody comply and just follow suit. See, society really wants to be the dominant cult. It has a whole bunch of beliefs that it expects everyone to operate off of. And they're simply just their beliefs and their opinions about how things should be in society. But they enforce these beliefs. And if you begin to believe something else or believe something different or think in ways that are different, then you now could become a threat and jeopardize the totality of society. So they must seek to stomp you out and stop what you're doing before it grows and becomes something that gets out of control. All these cults had something in common. And it wasn't just the mind control of a leader. They all was trying to get away from society. They all was radically different from society in their aspirations. They wanted something better. They felt like that they were being abused by the dominant culture, that they were being overlooked, that there was no empathy for them, and that society was closed-minded to something different, and that they needed a radical change in their lives. And they feel like they had good ideas or could be a part of something that was a good enough idea to ultimately change society as a whole once their micro models were implemented in society as a whole, where all the people could be fed and everybody could be happy. They had great ideals. Well, if you got great ideas, you're a cult. But since every year we vote, every 4 years we vote for a different set of ideals. That's who we choose to vote for based on who can come with the greatest idealism. But if someone walks up on the street with you with some good ideas, you say, well, there's a cult leader. Because they're not a part of the control mechanism of the government by way in which you determine what leader you want to give them that's going to maintain the system. So a cult is deeper than somebody with mind control, some individual with mind control that want power and want money. It's much deeper than that. All of these cults had something in common. They all wanted to create a better and different world and had alternative ideas from overall society. And in order to implement these alternative ideas and live peacefully with them, that they had to separate themselves from society. Now, some of these cults became dangerous, and I'm going to tell you how they became dangerous. Not because they're cults. Why they had to become cults, what you're calling a cult, is more dangerous than the fact that they were considered cults. Because by society being so narrow-minded, lacking compassion, and being close-minded to other views and other ways of perceiving reality and other ways of life, by society being close-minded to that and trying to suppress and stomp out alternative ideas and views and ways, that these people had to flee from the overall society. Your Rastafarians in Jamaica, they had to flee and go up in the hills. But after fleeing and going up in the hills, and after these different groups separating and being in isolation, they could no longer connect to greater society anymore. And they begin to have to develop in a very isolated situation with no natural way to relate harmoniously with overall society, to project their ideas off of. So now these ideas had to take their own course, and not being able to relate their ideas to overall society, a certain type of paranoia rose up. And then versus having a balanced relationship with overall society, extremism began to happen. These are products of having to exist in separation and isolation from the overall society. And then it began to take its own course when you mix paranoia, you mix extremism, you mix the inability to balance their ideas with the masses of society, with the masses of people. And then the ideas took a different turn. And that's when it got to a dangerous level with at least Jim Jones, at least the Dravidians. It took a dangerous turn because they lost total connection with the overall conscious frequency of society. But the problem is that society would not have accepted him anyway. So in the Jim Jones case, that they committed suicide didn't even matter, because at the point that society rejected them, they were already socially dead. because society rejected their ideals and their culture and their way of life and what they were trying to do. So they were dead before the suicide, before the Kool-Aid was drank. Society has a way of eliminating its relationship and its connection with those who have radically different and alternative views and ideas. So versus already being dead to society, they chose to leave the earth with dignity. That's what happened in Jonestown with Jim Jones. The same thing with Waco, Texas. But it wasn't just the fact that they were a cult that this happened, because that removes respect of these individuals with different views and different ideas that was rejected by society and forced to go into separation and isolation to get away from the type of tyranny that would suppress their differences. The Mormons was forced to go set up Utah because they was not respected. They believed in polygamy. They had different views and different ideas. They tell you when you're children, you can be what you want to be. And you can try to achieve the goals that you really want to achieve. But if you have ideas that's so different from the dominant culture of society, society will turn its back on you. And if they can't altogether stomp you out, suppress you, or reassimilate you back into society, then they'll just wash their hands with you and just leave you to yourself, to your own survival, with no assistance and support from the greater society unless you comply. So you're forced to be self-sufficient. You're forced to be independent. You're forced to live off the grid. You're forced to go into isolation, and you're forced to be affected from being in that isolation. And then they get mad at what comes from that isolation. They get mad at the type of culture and the type of ideas and behaviors that grow out of that isolation, but they forced it by not wanting to have a healthy relationship with entertaining different ideas and consciousness as the masses of society. So busy trying to maintain a particular way of living and being. This part one, I'm demystifying the cults. I'll come back with a part two. King Noble Black Supremacy. Join my website, www.kingnobleuncensored.com. Donate. Don't hate.